Hello everyone, my name is Eddie Bolen. I am the pastor at Edgewater United Methodist Church. I'm also the pastor at Midway United Methodist Church. I want to thank you so much for taking some time for watching this video. This video is part of a series that I'm offering during the month of December that is called A Christmas Story. And part of these videos, we're just taking parts of the Christmas story and just taking a look at them. And for this particular video, what I would like to invite you to do is to take a look at the Christmas story and the Christmas star, the star that emerges around Christmas time, and also the wise men who follow that star. And we're going to talk about four really big ideas that sort of move us all the way back to the beginning. Why is the Christmas star important? And then some ideas that will sort of begin to move us in our own selves to say, why is the Christmas star important for me? What difference does it make in my life? And so I hope that this is helpful, hope that this is inspiring, and hope that it gets you into God's Word, but also hope that it begins to enable you to be in a place where you can say, hey, that's not only interesting, but I want to start to incorporate that into my life. I want to see some transformation. I want to see some change in my life. And so that's what we're going to do with the wise men and also the star. And again, thank you for watching, and I really do. I hope that this is inspiring for you. Maybe you've probably, well, I'm sure that you have. I'm sure that all of you have already heard this. You're already found your perfect spot to go out into the night sky, and that I'm probably late to this. But I just found this out about a week ago, that there is going to be this event that happens in the month of December that has to do with the stars, has to do with the planets, and the stars and in the night sky. You know that in the month of December that we always have stars that shine their brightest. Even in these places, I just read something just a few minutes ago that said, more than 80% of the United States, more than 80% of the country is in areas where there is light pollution, where there is pollution that blacks out the night sky. So we are only able to see a fraction of the stars most people, other people that don't have light pollution, they're able to see. But there is something that even in our light pollution that we're going to be able to observe, that there is going to be a Christmas star. And so what is really interesting about that, and like I said, I'm sure that all of you know this, but I just stumbled on it. But there is a headline that I want to share with you. And it is from physics.org. That's not a website that I generally go to, but it's a headline that I found. It's phys.org. You can go and you can find it yourself. But this is what I wanted to share. This is their headline. This is the headline that they put on their website. In their closest alignment in 800 years, Jupiter and Saturn will create a wonder, a Christmas star. And so what will happen is that Jupiter and Saturn, they're going to line up so it looks like they're just one. So it looks like it's just one star, one point of light in the sky. So it says that they're going to be in perfect alignment in their closest alignment. In over 800 years, they are going to create a wonder, a Christmas star. This is what they follow up with. This is the subtitle of the headline. This is why I wanted to share it with you. The lousiest year in living memory will end with an offering of heavenly wonder, a Christmas star. And so the full headline is, in their closest alignment in 800 years, Jupiter and Saturn will create a wonder, a Christmas star. The lousiest year in living memory will end with an offering of heavenly wonder, a Christmas star. And I do want to acknowledge that this year has, in fact, it's been a terrible year for so many people. In fact, there are people that still continue to struggle a great deal in this time and in this place. And I would encourage you to please offer your prayers for them. Also begin to examine your own life. Look at where you are as a person and whatever gifts that you can bring, whatever gifts that you can offer to those who are struggling, who are suffering so much. Please do that. Please begin. This is the time. This is the time that although we can't be around our neighbors, this is the time to connect with our neighbors in any way that we can, and to connect with people that are in our families and our lives, because this is a lousy year, and it's been a lousy year for a lot of people, and so just be mindful of that. But one of the interesting things about that is that what is going to be happening on December 21st of 2020, especially in North America, that what you're going to do is you're going to be able to look out into the night sky, and you will see Jupiter and Saturn that will be the closest that they have been in more than 800 years. Now, additionally, from physics.org, it says that about every 20 years or so, that Jupiter and that these planets, Jupiter and Saturn, they will line up, but now they're going to be the closest than they've ever been in 800 years. And just pause for a minute and just realize that what is going to happen on December 21st of 2020, that Jupiter and Saturn are going to be the closest they've been since the Middle Ages, at least for us who are looking up from North America, that we're going to be able to see that. And so I encourage you to get out. I encourage you to take a minute to get outside during the night sky and take a look at that Christmas star that emerges. So why is it called the Christmas star? Why is it that there is conversations about a star? And you probably know this. You probably know, well, the wise men, that they followed the star. And that's the story that I want to invite you into. It is a story that is told in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew chapter 2. This is in fact the story that Matthew will tell us after... he will tell us this in the very beginning. This happens in Matthew chapter 2, starting at verse 1, going all the way through verse 12. We'll see historically what Matthew will do is Matthew will invite us in to see that in the time of King Herod, then there are wise men. After Jesus, in the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. And so he gives us this historical time, this historical moment that is here, and says at the time after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east, they come to Jerusalem and they begin to inquire about Jesus. They begin to look for Jesus. It could be that the wise men were experiencing a lousy year themselves. There can be oppression that comes during times and during periods like that. But in a lousy year, that's what I wanted us to do. That in the place that we find ourselves in this year of December of 2020, that in a lousy year, I want to encourage you not just to look up at the stars, but I want to encourage you to follow the stars, because that's the one thing that we can do, is that we can take a moment and that we can look up and we can follow the stars. Because when you are following the stars, there is something that is rather extraordinary that can happen. And I will tell you that one of my first instances where I really experienced something extraordinary in following the stars is I begged and pleaded with my parents when I was in middle school one night. And I begged and pleaded with them on a summer night in August to let me stay outside. I was going to stay in my own yard. I wasn't asking to go anywhere. But there was a meteor shower, and I'd never seen a meteor shower. A couple of times I'd seen what were falling stars, but there was a meteor shower that was coming. And so I talked to my friend. I was interested. I was interested in watching the stars. I was interested in astronomy and all that kind of stuff. Astronauts, everything. It just captured my imagination, captured my interest. But for my friend, I convinced him. I said, hey, there's going to be a meteor shower tonight. Let's stay up and watching these. Well, of course, it's not going to happen until about 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like, well, that's not really the middle of the night. But what happened is that my parents let me do it. We stayed in our front yard and we were able to do it. We were able to stay up. We were able to watch this meteor shower. And so what happened is that as it started to get dark, we stayed out for a long time, not seeing absolutely anything. But then all of a sudden what happened is that one, and then we saw one, then we saw two, and then they just came in rapid succession. One of the most amazing things about that experience and about being there is that there were at least 3 or 4 times that when we were in these chairs and we were leaning back and we were watching these stars as they were coming back, there were some that just made us leap to our feet, some that made us just jump up just by watching the stars. And as middle school kids, we said that one was so close that it had to have crashed into the earth. There was no way that it could have burned up, that it could have gotten burned completely, that it had to crash into the earth. But the thing about it is that it moved us, that just by looking at those stars, it moved us. And so that is the thing that can happen to us, is that when we follow the stars, that when we have this lousy year that is there, that there is something about the night sky, and there is something potentially about the light that Jesus shows us through the stars, and the light that is revealed to us through the stars, that can make us excited, that can make us get to a place where we are ready to do everything that we can to follow that star. This is where the origin of the Christmas star comes from, is that at the very birth of Jesus, that one of the things that announced Jesus' birth, was this star that immediately rose. And these wise men, these are people who you may have heard about as being magi. They were people who were astrologers. There's no credentials. They were people who were astrologers. That is, they followed. That is, they studied the stars. They would be considered learned scientists. They would be considered astronomers in their own right. But this is a time where there weren't credentials. This is a time when there wasn't even a scientific revolution. And so as they were people who were wise people, they were learned people. They had studied the stars, and what they saw is that at the birth of Jesus, that as Jesus was born, that what they did is they began to follow the stars because there was this light. There was this light that came into the middle of this dark night, and they began to go, and they began to follow the star. And that's one of the things about it, is that in a lousy year, that no matter what is happening in your life, that God is, and this is the promise that we gather, that we are able to obtain from the story of the wise men and the Christmas star, is that in lousy years, as well as really years that we are doing really well in, is that God brings a point of light into our world. This is the promise that we always have from God, is that God always brings this light that comes to us. And so that's what I want to encourage you to do, that in a lousy year, do everything that you can to follow the stars. There's a study at the University of California, Irvine, and says that looking up at the stars, that one of the benefits that it has is that it is able to make us nicer. That just by going out and taking a look at the night star, that it makes us nicer. The reason being is because looking up, particularly looking up and paying attention to the stars, it creates this awe in us. This is something that comes directly out of the Psalms. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, there's always this imagination. It invites creativity when we look up. And so that's one of the benefits that we have, is that in lousy years that we're able to look up and to follow the stars. And so that's the first thing that I want to encourage you to do, that in this year that we find ourselves in 2020, to do like these wise men that we find in the time of King Herod, that in this time when we have transitions in our own president, that in this time, let us take a moment, let us look up and follow the stars. Now, particularly the star that God brings into our world at the birth of Jesus, the Christmas star. That the Christmas star points us beyond ordinary circumstances, and the Christmas star points us beyond our normal, ordinary boundaries. One of the interesting things about the story of the wise men that Matthew tells us in Matthew chapter 2, starting at verse 1 and continuing through, is that if you go down to verse 2, that the wise men will come, as they have observed this star at its rising, then the wise men, they will find themselves coming into King Herod's palace. And they will say this, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." And I want you to just think about that. Just think about it for a minute. Matthew chapter 2, verse 2. If you have a chance, if you've got an opportunity, take a look at it in your own scripture. But Matthew chapter 2, verse 2, that what they have followed and what they have studied is that they have studied that this star, that when it rises, that it is going to point them to the King of the Jews. So what the wise men do is they go to the place that traditionally, the place that is expected, the place that is ordinary, the place that is normal, the place that you would go to find a king is in the palace. And so they find themselves in the palace, around King Herod's palace, and they ask King Herod, they say, "Well, tell us, where is this King of the Jews that has been born?" And so that's the palace, is where you would expect to find the king. To which King Herod begins to meet with his advisors and says, "I want you to tell me what these men are doing." And so you can imagine the scene. If you follow Matthew chapter 2, you can see them as they do. As King Herod begins to meet with his advisors, turns to his advisors, and he says, "What are these men asking about? What is happening here?" And they begin to tell him. They say, "Well, this is what the prophets of the Hebrew Scriptures have said." Matthew chapter 2, verse 6, "And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." And so as he turns to his advisors, they say, yes, this has been predicted. This is historically what is going to happen, that the king is going to be that is going to be born. And so these men have been led by this star. It has brought them here. It has brought them into this place because they expected that this is the palace is where the king would be, but no, the king is there. And so then King Herod will then invite the wise men into his inner circle and say, well, I want you to let me know that when you find this king, let me know so that I may go, so that I may worship him too. But this is exactly what we find, is that when we are willing to risk, when we are willing to let our guard down, when we are willing to find the Christmas star that God puts in front of us, that points us toward Jesus, what it will do is it will move us beyond our ordinary situations, our ordinary circumstances. Because what it does is it gives us a clearer vision of really God coming into our world. And so this is what the wise men do. They find themselves, and I thought about this, I was thinking about this as they find themselves at King Herod's palace, that they will find themselves in a sense at a dead end. They find themselves there, but they continue to not end their journey, but they continue their journey beyond their ordinary circumstances. So I was actually, as I was reading the scripture, as I was studying the scripture, I was thinking how they found themselves at a dead end, or are they just beyond normal, ordinary circumstances? And that's what I wanted to lean on, because I think that that's part of the hope that comes out of the Christmas star, that as we follow the stars that God reveals to us, when we follow the star that Jesus is showing us, what it will do is it will move us outside of our ordinary circumstances. So kings are not only found in palaces, but this king, the king that this Christmas star is pointing to, is a king that is beyond the ordinary palace. This is a king that is born in Bethlehem of Judea. And so following the stars, Christmas stars, point us beyond our ordinary circumstances. They point us beyond our boundaries. Just following up with our first one, in a lousy year, follow the stars, because, wow, the stars have a potential, especially the Christmas star that God reveals to us. It has the potential to keep us excited and keeps us looking up. And number 3, the Christmas star has the potential to offer you overwhelming joy. Not among the stars, that is the thing, that it has the potential to offer you overwhelming joy, and not just beyond the stars, but in your ordinary life, in your ordinary circumstances where you live and where you find yourself. That the Christmas star may move you beyond those ordinary circumstances, but this is what the Christmas star does, is that it has the potential, and mind you, it has the potential to create this overwhelming joy for you to experience in your life. Notice this, is that as the wise men, and one of the interesting things that you may notice about Matthew chapter 2, that at the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. They were asking, where is this child who has been born King of the Jews? And you'll find that as they begin to ask, that the child, that Jesus has already been born, they've been following his star, and they are coming into the palace, and they're asking, where is this king? Where is the King of the Jews that is there? And as they move away from that palace, as they continue their journey outside of the palace, there is this overwhelming joy that begins to capture them. Now, the overwhelming joy that comes, and particularly this is where it comes into Matthew chapter 2, verse 10, when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary and his mother, and they knelt down and they paid him homage. As they knelt down and they began to pay him homage. Now, one of the things about what is unique about the Christmas star is John chapter 1 captures this for us so remarkably well. And so I want to encourage you to take a look at John chapter 1 that says this. John chapter 1 begins this way. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And that's what I want you to particularly pay attention to. Is that what God is showing us, and what John captures for us, is that the light of the Christmas star shines in the darkness, but the darkness is not able to overcome it. For the wise men, a single star, think about this, a single star, a single point of light in the night sky led to this overwhelming joy in their lives. In their lives as they found themselves in the house where Jesus was born. Jesus' light that is in our world leads us to joy on the ground, and it leads us to joy in our lives. It's not something. It is just not something that only creates awe in us, but the light of Jesus Christ. It leads us to experience joy when we find it in our own lives, in our ordinary circumstances. When we come and we find ourselves in that place where the wise men found themselves at the crib with Jesus. And so the fourth thing that the Christmas star does is that Christmas star, it reminds us that out of the gifts that we have been given, that it reminds us that out of the abundance to bring your gifts, to bring all the gifts that we have to offer into this world. Notice this, in Matthew chapter 2, verse 2, the wise men, when they first go into the palace of King Herod, they say, "Tell us where this child has been born, because we have seen his star as it rises, and we have come to pay him homage." And then, you'll notice then in Matthew chapter 2, as they come into the house, they saw with the child and his Mary mother, and they knelt down and they paid him homage. That's an interesting word. Homage is essentially, it is literally translated as is the Lord's man. It is, and it comes out of a feudal society, a vassal to a lord. And so it is, they're demonstrating, they're saying, you know what, we are literally this child, we are this child's man, we are this child's main man, and these are the gifts that we have brought. These are the gifts that we have brought to show this child. That's one of those things that I want to encourage you to do, especially as you read this story. To ask yourself, what are the gifts that you are bringing to show that you are a follower of Jesus? Because as we begin to follow Jesus, as we begin to come ourselves into this life of Jesus, well, Jesus gives us the invitation. Jesus is the one that invites us. And the very first place that we all come into a life with Jesus Christ is we come into a life with Jesus Christ with these words, "Come, follow me." We're not expected to bring any gifts. We're not expected to bring any gifts, any talents, nothing. But we are just called to bring ourselves. Come and follow me. And that next step, that we are called to see the light. Jesus who shines in the dark. We are called to see, not only are we following Jesus, but now we see Jesus as this light that shines in what is at times a very dark and a very lousy world. And after that, seeing the influence of that light around our own cribs, our own Christmas trees, our own darkest nights of grief and fear, as we begin to see that light and see the influence that the light of Jesus has in our lives, the cribs that we're around, the Christmas trees that we're around, the kind of fear, the kind of grief that we're having, when we see this light of Jesus Christ that shines in our lives, that's when we begin to ask, okay, what is the gift that I'm bringing? What is the gift that I can bring into this place? And notice how enduring this is. Notice how enduring it is that the wise men who brings gifts to Jesus, the gifts that we continue to bring to family and friends and loved ones in our own lives. Notice how enduring this is. And also, what about this? More than 2,000 years later, we still bring gifts to babies. And in fact, not only do we bring gifts to babies, but we shower them with gifts of those who are newly born for them as well as for their parents. And we do this out of joy. And so that's what I want you to begin to reflect on as you come to this story of Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 through 12, and this story of wise men and stars. And I think this is the most valuable insight that we can gather, especially in this year of 2020 from this story, is that out of the joy that we're experiencing, because there have been a lot of setbacks, there have been a lot of places where we can point out, we can say, you know what, this has truly been a lousy year. But just think about the joy that we've seen. Just think about the light of Jesus Christ that has shone in your own darkness. And out of that joy, what gifts will you shower? to show that you are the Lord's main person, to show that you are paying homage to Jesus Christ, who is Lord and who is Savior of your life. What are the gifts that you're bringing out of your joy? One of the interesting things about this story of the wise men and the star that they are following is that the wise men, it takes them a few months before they find themselves at, and if you notice this, if you read this story real closely, you will see where Jesus is, that Jesus is with Mary, his mother, and they are not at the manger, but they are in fact in a home. They have went through King Herod, and now they are followed. And so now it is out of their joy, and it is in their commitment to continue to look up and to continue to follow the star, that they have come and they have brought these Christmas gifts for the baby Jesus. And so that's what I want to ask you and invite you to reflect on, to take some time, that immediately after you stop watching this video, to begin to take some time and to begin to ask yourself, out of the joy that I've found, out of the joy that I'm seeing in the Christmas star, that no matter if this year, in all the lousy hours, days, months, maybe even several months that I've had in this year, this is where I'm finding joy. This is where I am seeing joy, that when I look out among the stars, that when I see the light of the Christmas star, from the joy that comes from the light of the Christmas star, these are the gifts that I'm bringing right now to show and to pay homage, to show that I'm a person who is called by God's grace and who is filled with the joy that only God provides. These are the very gifts that I'm bringing. And so that's what I want you to do, is that as you end this video, to begin to observe, to begin to think about what are those gifts that you're bringing right now. And by all means, this is the time to pray. This is the time to seek. And this is the time that none of us can forget to look up into the stars. I hope that this is helpful for you, and I hope that you are having a blessed season of Advent as we prepare for Christmas. Thanks again for watching.